Welcome back to Balmer's Workshop, and thanks so much for joining me here again for part 2 of the custom rear bumper build. Last time we put together the brackets to build the bumper on. Of course, we started with coroplast and then we made them out of steel, and the reason for that, of course, as explained, was so that we had a nice firm platform to build the rest of the bumper on. Then we went ahead and built the top plate, and we completed that. So far we've worked in 2D, and now it's time to work in 3D with the back plate. And so now that I am ready to make my back plate, we know that it's going to be 48 inches wide. I've got 1.5 inch long 45-degree segments, and I have, let's see here, a 6-inch long back piece. Actually 6 1/4. Yeah, 6 1/4. So 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3, plus 6 1/4 is 9 1/4 inches total I need to make my piece out of. So I'm going to cut 9 1/4 by 48. So let's talk about working with coroplast. Obviously, it's really important to keep your lines really precise and crisp. So I use a backstop against the edge of the coroplast. In this case, I'm just using some heavy pieces of angle iron, and from those I measure out using a square. I find this to be much more precise than using a tape measure. It keeps everything really clean. And then obviously when you make your cut, you want to use a straight edge, as you see me doing, and clamp that straight edge in place rather than just holding it with your hand, and that way it ensures that it doesn't shift on you while you're making your cut, and it keeps everything really accurate. So now I need to make a couple of bends in this piece of coroplast, so I'm marking them out. I'm going to make my lines, and this time, rather than cutting through the coroplast, I'm just going to score it. I'm going to cut through one layer. And I get a nice bend there, as you see, and we'll do the next one. Now here's an important tip. You always want to cut across the ribs when you're cutting a corrugated product, be it plastic or cardboard. If you cut with the ribs, you'll get a really inaccurate bend. If you cut across the ribs, you get a really nice clean bend. So anytime you're making a bend, cut across the ribs. And now what I'm going to do is just mark myself a center line so that I can mate the back plate up to the top plate really well, and I will flip the whole assembly over to tape them together. And the reason for that is you want to tape the insides of the bends rather than the outside of the bends, and again that keeps things really crisp. So I tack those together to make sure everything's lined up, and then to make it nice and solid I essentially weld it together using one long strip of tape. I've got a straight edge along the top to ensure that I'm dead flat, and of course I'm using stands to achieve that. I've cut out a piece now. This edge measured 9 1/4, which is the same as this, with bends at 1.5 from each leading edge, from the leading edge and the trailing edge I should say. I've bent them to approximately 45-degree angles, and if I put that in place you can see that it's a very nice fit up. I've marked a bit of an angle there. It's not quite 45, I'd call that probably 55, maybe 60 degrees, and then just a straight line down. That's going to create a nice complementary shape for the outside of this. Definitely I'm too wide, there's no question about that, but I'm just going to cut that so I can look at the shape and make sure that I'm kind of happy with that type of a shape, and then I think I'll bring the entire edge in. So I'll shrink down this top plate a little bit, and we'll take this same sort of a line configuration and move it over as well. But you obviously want to do these things in steps, small steps, to make sure that you're happy. For instance, if I had cut any deeper on this angle here, I wouldn't have been happy with it, and I'd have to redo my top plate. So you go little increments at a time, ensuring that you're still happy with what's happening. So I'm just going to go ahead and make these cuts now, and I'll get right back to you. And just like that, I have them cut. And there we go. So it looks nice. I like that shape, actually. I do like that shape quite a bit. Make a nice angle on there. I might go a little steeper here to try to achieve a 45 there, but we're pretty darn close, and definitely a little too wide. Just move my straight edge over a little so you get a better look at that. But yeah, that's certainly going to wind up considerably too wide, because we'll be out here by the time we're done, and that's just going to look really bulky. So I'll probably shrink this down by almost half of its width, but I'm just going to ponder that a little bit. So I'll probably just put a couple little bits of tape on there, and maybe one down here to kind of tack it in place, and just take a good look at it, do a few measurements, take my time, give it some thought, and make my cuts after that. Alright, 3 pieces of trusty tape. You could use different kinds of tape for this, but I find insulation or sheathing tape to be the best. It sticks very, very well to plastic, and you get nice precise fit up with it. So there we go, not bad. Yeah, I quite like that shape. So there's the look. Again, obviously too wide, I know that, but it's this shape that I want to create here first to make sure that I'm happy with that before I bring this whole thing in. But yeah, we'll probably reduce this by about half its width. Other than being too wide, it looks quite good, I think. Further progress. So I've trimmed these sides now, and this measurement is now 3/4 of an inch. It was 2 inches, so I've taken off just a little more than half. I have not adjusted this piece yet, so you can see there how much I've removed. It's pretty considerable, and I've made a little mark obviously where the edge of my top plate now is, and I will draw myself some new lines to cut this corner panel by. Again, I'm going to go on approximately a 45-degree angle off of this, and then straight down and 45 back again underneath. More or less the same as I've done here. I'm just going to move it all in. So that's my next step, and then we can try to make a side panel for it and then an end cap. And that's pretty much it for this side, if it all looks good when I'm done. All right, it is almost lunchtime, and I have made some good progress on this corner. So let's give you a different view here. I think it looks decent with the little upswept outside angle there. We're still a little wider than I like, so I might want to bring that in a tiny bit. Looks good along this angle, I think. But along here, I don't like my flat side. It's there's just too much room at the bottom here. I want it to be more consistent with the top. So what I'm gonna do next after lunch is I'm gonna cut a new angle on the side of this guy. I'm gonna cut that in a little bit so that it follows the shape of the truck, where it kind of comes in like this here. We'll follow that by trimming out that something like that. But we still will have this bigger crest here to deal with, so I'm not completely sure what to do there yet. I could come even closer in here. I could remove more of that, but we're down to very little. So we'll see how it looks after I make my angle cut in here. And that is the next thing. So I finished up, excuse me, this corner. Again, we got a nice angle there that I'm reasonably happy with, but it sticks out too far, and it's just a little bulky looking, like I said earlier. So I went over and did this side a little differently. What I did is, from my 1.5 inch wide 45-degree angle part, I came up to 3/4 of an inch. So, you know, obviously reducing it by half to give it a little more swept look, and more importantly, so that this dimension is smaller, and therefore the bumper sits, or I should say the bumper protrudes less to the outside of the vehicle. So instead of being 1.5 inches out, now it's only 3/4 of an inch out, and I think that's going to look a lot better. And I've just marked my angle here to cut the bumper on. How I came up with that angle was, let me just grab my piece of flat bar that I used. I took this piece of flat bar, I took my handy dandy magnetic level, or angle finder rather, protractor, and I attached it thusly. I held it up to the side of the vehicle. I came up with an approximate 75-degree angle that I thought was quite happy with the, the look of the side of the vehicle, and I just simply transferred that angle to here. So now I'm going to cut that, and then we'll try to make a side panel for it, and it should look really good. And I think I'm still maybe too far ahead here. I don't necessarily want to go all the way to this line with my bumper, but again, always best to go too far and cut it back rather than wish you had gone further than you did. So we'll complete this corner, and then we'll see what we think in terms of the distance that it goes forward, like I just said. And the customer has just messaged me wondering how progress is coming, so I will be able to send him some pictures of each side, and he can kind of get a feel for what we're doing and make up his mind whether he likes either one or whether he wants to see changes. I have heard back from my customer, And much like I feel, he thinks that the bumper should be cut basically along this line here, and we'll lose this portion because it's just a little too long. It looks a little funny the way it extends like that. So I'm going to remove the bumper, or the mock-up of the bumper rather. I'm going to spread it out flat again by cutting the joints at all those panels, and then I will make the cuts necessary for that and recap the end once I put it all back together. In order to flatten it, of course, I'll have to remove this side as well, and because the customer has decided not to go with this style, he's gone with the other side, like I said, the one that I recommended. I won't rebuild this side of the mock-up when I put it back on, because it's just a waste of time. So we'll just ignore this corner and focus on this, and obviously when we're done we'll just mirror it for the other side of the vehicle. One other small adjustment that I may make to the final product that I'm just not sure about yet is with this radius. If you look carefully, I mean, it doesn't match the vehicle perfectly. I think I already mentioned that. This is simply a 6-inch diameter that I based this on, and so, you know, this is a straight section where you've got a little bit of a curve in the body of the van. I might try to remedy that a little bit. It doesn't look bad at all, you know, I really don't mind the way that it looks. That's pretty standard for a bumper not to necessarily follow that perfectly, but I can remedy it. And it'll be interesting, I think, to show you how I can do that without completely redoing this whole massive piece of coroplast. In order to clean up this corner, what I've done is I've just copied the line from this bumper onto a piece of paper. It's quite stiff paper, so it cuts fairly well, and it's easy to handle and work with, but it's not so thick that it's a pain in the butt. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically look for the points on this curve where it comes further away from the body than I would like, which is basically from about this point to about this point. So now I can go ahead and more or less copy those points straight onto my piece of paper here. Just looking for approximate back spacing. And that should be right. So now what I'm going to do is take my French curve set, which is a handy thing that I have from high school, and I'm going to try to find a curve that will more closely match that. And of course what I'm going to do, I'll cut this section out, but what I'll do is leave a decent portion in here. I'll start with a cut that I think is, or a curve rather, that I think is actually too soft, and then I'll slowly steepen it up to make it fit so that I don't wind up going too far and having to redo my piece. So here's the old trusty French curve set, and I want to bring this guy in by quite a lot. That's probably not a bad curve to choose. Let's do this, because I don't like the way that comes in so tight there. So what we'll do is we'll go from this point to this point, and we'll bring in something with quite a lot steeper of a curve. I like that better. So we'll take that away, go to that. That's not bad. So now what I'll do is cut that out, and then we'll fit it up to the vehicle over top of the bumper mock-up and see how it looks. And there you are. You can see it does match the vehicle lines a lot better now, but it's a bit tight in that spot where I just pointed to, so we'll open that up a little bit. I'll just make a mark on either side of that point and take it over to the bench and just cut that out slightly. And there you are. At that point, I'm very happy with the way that it looks, and so it's time to transfer that coroplast mock-up into steel. And in this case, we're going to use 10 gauge mild steel, and that's what I'm putting on the hoist. The first thing that I'm going to do is mark out all my bend lines, or my forming lines, and that's a critical thing, making sure that they're dead straight and that I mark all the correct angles for them so that when I send this out for forming, what I get back is exactly what I expect. So I mark all those lines first, and then I bring the mock-up into position and trace all around it. It's important when you do this to flip the mock-up over and trace it on both sides. That way, if there's any discrepancies with the symmetry, you'll see that, and then you can go ahead and research those issues and correct them before you go ahead and cut this thing out. In my case, there were no symmetry issues. It was exactly symmetrical side to side, so I cut it out using my handy-dandy plasma cutter. I use a freehand plasma cutter for cutting, and it works wonderfully. If you don't have one, this can be done with a zip disc on a grinder, or many zip discs on a grinder. You'll definitely go through them, but it can be done that way. If you're a hobbyist and you're only going to do one bumper, definitely don't invest in a plasma cutter. It's a huge investment for only one bumper. Just use zip discs and grinding discs, and go at it like I am here. In this case, I'm only cleaning it up, but you could have actually cut it out this way. So now I will send the bumper out for forming according to those lines that I marked, and you can see on the bench there, and it will come back all bent up and ready for fit up. And you'll see that in just a moment once we finish cleaning this thing up here. Again, if you're doing this yourself, you could cut these pieces all separately and weld them all together, but I don't recommend that. I recommend doing exactly what I'm showing you here and marking your bend lines as I have done, and then take it to a shop. You know, there's going to be definitely a local metalworking shop that you can take it to who will be able to bend this out for you just the way you see it done here. So now I take my plasma cutter again and cut out all my 3 receiver locations, and I also need to cut the rest of the pieces that will be bent to complement the bumper and finish it off. So that's what you see me doing here. So really that's about it for putting the shell together. It's just a matter of plasma cutting by hand or zip disc by hand, and then for me sending it out for forming. If you happen to have a forming press, then you're a real lucky guy, luckier than me, and you can form it in-house. But I definitely couldn't do that. You can see it there in place on the vehicle, getting everything tacked up, and the fit up worked out just great. I was really happy with the way that everything came together. You can see the receiver locations are cut out, and so is the hole for the swing away spindle to go in. You see that on the right there underneath the tail light, and that's pretty much a wrap. She's ready to go for the next stage. So the next stage is going to be full weld up, as well as adding the swing away tire carrier to it. So that will be in part 3 of this build. Looking forward to that one. I hope you all come back and join me for it. I know this isn't the most exciting series, but you know, if you want to learn how to build things, it's not all fun and games. There is a lot of learning to be done, so I'm trying to teach you as much as I can here. Please stick with me, come back for the number 3, and check out all the other videos. Thanks again for coming back to Balmer's Workshop, and we'll see you soon. Please like, comment, and subscribe.